Hey, this is Sam. Welcome back to BNS About Movies. This is the second part of our episode on the All the Haunts BRs, a compendium of folk horror, volume 2, released by Severin. The set kind of takes us not just around the world of folk horror, but our world itself. And that's going to land us in Thailand with Nang Nak, which is based on the legend of Mae Nak Pha Krong. I don't know if that's right. As you know, I have problems pronouncing English words, so just give me a little bit of grace this episode. Anyway, there's a gorgeous woman named Nak who once lived on the banks of the Phra Kanong Canal with her husband Mok. As he went to battle in the King Tung Wars, she died giving birth to their child. When he returned from the battles that he barely survived, he found her waiting for him as a ghost. And despite the warnings of others, he lived with her until learning the truth. Running in fear, she attacked the villagers who she felt drove him away. In some versions of this story, there's a monk named Sodet Phra Phuchakhan, oh boy, who defeats Nak by confining her spirit in the bone of her forehead, which he keeps on his waistband. The Thai royal family was said to still own this magical relic, and Admiral Prince Akbara, boy, I'm not going to pronounce that last name. He was the Prince of Shumpyon, and the father of the Thai Navy also claimed that he had this occult object in his possession. This is the 13th and by no means the final adaptation of this legend. It moves the story a bit forward in time as Mac is fighting the Siamese-Vietnamese War of the 1830s. When he returns, he lives with Nak and their child, as the villagers never told him that she died. But anyone that starts to tell him that things are a little strange soon dies at the spectral hands of her ghost. Mok discovers the truth as she drops a comb and her ghostly arm extends longer than it should. Now that's close to the legend. The legend sometimes explains that she drops a piece of fruit and has to reach and grab it. Even after their home is exorcised and burnt to the ground, Nok still rages. Her husband runs and tries to hide from her until Buddhist monk Somdae To, who's the most sainted monk in Thailand's history, finally convinces her to stop and that she'll be reunited in the afterlife with her husband and child. He then cuts the center of her forehead of her corpse open, allowing her spirit to leave, and creates a talisman from it that ends up in the possession of the leader of the Royal Navy, just as they claimed. As I've gone from Spiritland to Spiritland throughout this set, I've seen how many civilizations have tried to make sense of the unknown, which would be love and death. And this story sets forth the notion that one of these notions doesn't always stop the other. Sundel Bolong from 1981 is the next one, and this is an Indonesian myth based on the prostitute or woman with hole in her. It refers to a dead sex worker who was either given birth inside the grave or had a child that was born through a hole in her back that is concealed by her long black hair. Wearing a long white gown, this vengeful spirit castrates men and takes children to replace the one that she has lost. This film stars Susanna, the queen of Indonesian horror, who we'll get into a bit. She plays Elisa, who learns during her wedding reception that her new husband, played by Barry Prima, must go out to the sea. As she waits alone, she decides to take a job as a model for a clothing store. To her horror, she learns that it's really her old boss from when she was a call girl, Mommy, who is working with Rudy, the scummy owner of the store, that he attempts to assault her. As she runs, a station wagon forces her off the road. 4 thugs and Rudy soon emerge to attack her, assaulting her several times. She gets no justice from the courts, and a doctor refuses her when she tries to get an abortion. So when she tries to do it herself, she ends up dying, as her maid finds her in a pool of blood along with a dead fetus. When her husband returns home, he puts flowers on her grave that mysteriously appear on their bed. He also meets her near twin Shinta, who is truly her and able to transform into a cat. But now let's talk about the revenge, and there's so much revenge in this movie. Trees falling on men, a scumbag impaled by the tombstone of the woman he put on this path, even hands that emerge from a wall to kill someone. How classic is this movie in its lead? When it was remade in 2018, the main character was renamed Susanna, and the film was called Susanna Bernapas Dalam Kubur in tribute. You will believe that a ghost can eat 200 pieces of satay and drink an entire vat of soup before everything she consumed drains from the hole in her back. You will hear Night on Bald Mountain several times, and your mind will be destroyed in all the best of ways. Sadly, I feel that this is a film that maybe speaks just as much to our world today as it did when it was made across the world 40 years ago. A woman cannot get justice in any traditional way, much less rid herself of a child born through sexual assault. She does not have control of her own body because of the world of men. Only the supernatural can give her what she deserves. But about Susanna, there's a documentary on the set by David Gregory, the owner of Severin, Susanna, the Queen of Black Magic. While nearly unknown in the U.S., Susanna was the queen of Indonesian horror. She is Javanese, Minnehasan, Sudanese, German, Dutch. She was born to a singer, Johan Beho, and actor Willem van Osch. And she started acting in 1958. She won a contest to be in a movie called Asrama Dara. By the end of the 60s, she was married to an actor named Dicky Suprado, who this film gets into as he left her and would not grant her a divorce. And then by 1972, she was the most popular actress in this country because of the film Bernafas Dalam Lumpur had a frank depiction of sexuality that was incendiary in Indonesia, leading to it being banned. Her real fame came from horror movies with long black hair and a terrifying stare, sort of like an Indonesian Barbara Steele. Susanna played frightening villains in a series of movies that thrilled and also frightened audiences. She also kept up the appearance of magic in her personal life. Some claim she prayed to a lady of the sea and that she drank jasmine flowers to remain young. There's also the story that when she made the movie Naya Bulorong, that the wig of snakes they placed on her head was not calm until it went onto her head. Her death in 2018 from diabetes complications was just as mysterious as the life she led, to the point that some claimed that she was murdered. What she left behind was a career filled with so many roles playing women done wrong. That's apparent in nearly every actress's career, but where Susanna differs is that once the act had been done to her, she returns and gets her comeuppance. Sure, her back may be leaking and leeches could be pouring out of her body, but then she'd have fixed that stare at her enemies and found a dignity that many women done wrong in cinema never attain. This documentary combines clips of her most famous films with interviews with family members, colleagues, filmmakers, and historians. What emerges is exactly what should from a film like this: a burning desire to seek out all Susanna's films and devour them with a magical appetite. Kind of like the one that she did in Soto Belong, to just eat all that food and drink all that soup. Now let's get back to the interview that I got to do with Kayla Janice, who put this entire set together. Is there a dream film that maybe you didn't get on the set that you'd like to have on a future set? Not that I want to screw up the rights issues or anything, but
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think, because like Rights of May was one we were trying to get that one on the last box set, and it took us like so long. The director kept saying like, yes, I agree. And then like, no, I've decided I'm not going to release any of my films ever again. And then he would, 6 months later would be like, okay, I think I want to do it. And then he'd be like, no, I don't want to do it. I think Criterion might be better for a box set or whatever, like it was just like this, and we're like, no. But but eventually Carlotta Films in France, who had done a Mike DeLeon box set, they really spoke up. They vouched for us, because he liked them. He was very happy with their box set they did. And so the guy from Carlotta Films said to him, like, look, it's a good company. They're going to do a nice job on your film or whatever. And so it was really thanks to them that he came through. So we did get that. There was another film that we got that I can't say what it is, but another company. We ended up getting kind of like a bad deal on thing, and then somebody else got the film. That's all I'm gonna say. So we actually had the film. We had done all the extras, and then we ended up having to give them over to another label. I don't know if that label has announced the movie yet, so I'm not gonna say what it is.
I will not ask.
But yeah, so it happens all the time. There's so much competition. Like I would say, like the biggest thing is just like when you want a film, being able to find elements for the film, so sometimes you can find the rights holder and they want to work with you, but they don't have access. They don't know where the negatives are. They don't have, all the existing film prints are crap, so it's like trying to find an actual usable film elements is usually the biggest problem, and then only secondly to that is the fact that, it's a very competitive market. There's so many Blu-ray labels out there now that a lot of them are going after the same films. And so when you're doing a really ambitious project where you're trying to get a bunch of things that are thematically connected, and you lose one of the films, it can kind of throw off your curating, because you're like, well, now this other film doesn't make sense because it was supposed to go with that film or whatever. So that kind of stuff happens. But there's always so much more stuff out there. There are so many movies that have never been on Blu-ray,
Yeah.
So even when you lose one, it's kind of like you can't cry about it for too long, because there's a million other movies that you could be giving all that energy to.
The fact that movies that I thought were lost forever now just exist on my shelf and I can just grab them at any point.
You'll say David Gregory is like he's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like he's like the filmmaker whisperer guy, a lot of the filmmakers who just don't even answer emails from anyone, like people be trying to get a film like Eyes of Fire, for instance, the box set. Every label had been trying to get that movie. All kinds of people had been trying to find the director and trying to pitch him on releasing. For whatever reason, he was unresponsive to so many other people. Before David Gregory contacted him. He said yes instantly. And I was like, how the hell did you get that to happen? He's like, I don't know, And so And David Gregory is like that with all kinds of people, you know, like as you can see, Severin just announced some Russ Meyer films. So I mean, that's David Gregory, right? But he is a very charming and very sincere person. Like he's a very honest person and very straight shooting person. And you know, like I don't know. I feel like, you know, I've worked for him now for like 7 years or something, and I've never worked for a better boss than David, you know, easy. And so he has an enthusiasm and a sincerity and all these qualities that I think just come across instantly to whoever he's trying to get a movie from. I face a lot more when I'm trying to get a movie, I face a lot more challenges than he does. He's and then I'll call him and I'll be like, David, you gotta help me get this movie, you know. Yeah, so he's amazing.
Beauty and the Beast from 1978 is next, and this is directed by Gerhard Hurst, who you may have seen his films The Cremator, Morgiana, The Ninth Heart, or Ferret Vampire. Julie's the youngest of 3 daughters born to a widower. One day, while he's riding by horseback and looking for a flower for his daughter, he wakens in front of the horrific castle of Netvor, a half-man, half-falcon creature that condemns him to death for picking one of his flowers, unless his daughter sacrifices herself and lives forever with him. He should be worried. After all, his horse has already died, forcing him to walk, and he's also found one body of a dead woman. So when he asks his daughters to save him, the already married and wealthy Gabinka and Malinka just refuse, but Julie saves her father, just as her beauty will soon rescue the beast. Yes, just like the Disney film, this is based on La Belle et la Bête by Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont. Unlike the animated version, this has no dancing table service. Instead, it's a gothic and frightening film, a movie that Hertz didn't want to make as he saw in the Jean Cocteau film is unapproachable in its perfection. Yet he does the same here, turning nearly every frame into what looks like a painting, and having an otherworldly beast that is once terrifying and sexual, with human eyes calling out from behind a bird's face. The Ninth Heart is next, and it's about a student named Martin who's volunteered to seek out the cure for Princess Adriana, who's been knocked down and out by a mysterious illness. The truth is, it's no normal sickness. A magician has enchanted her as part of his plan, which involves creating a magic potion to return his youth from the blood of 9 children's hearts. This is also directed by Hertz, who everything in this feels handmade, down to the poster by surrealist painter, writer, and ceramicist Eva Svrang-Mezhirkova. Boy, it's not one that's right. This was shot at the same time as Beauty and the Beast, which we spoke about, in an attempt to save on costs, and is a fairy tale created in modern times that in no way feels like the stories our parents told us at bedtime. By literally capturing the young hearts of the young men who have come to save Adriana, the magician is seeking to take their vitality and become hale and hearty and new. Unlike them, Martin has no love for the princess. Instead, the Grand Duke allows him to take on the mission, instead of sending him and the street circus people he has fallen in with to jail, most especially Tonka, who is the daughter of a puppeteer. Joined by the Grand Duke's jester and wearing a cloak of invisibility, the 2 men go across the river Styx, the Grand Duke's former alchemists, dark and foreboding castle, a place filled with corpses, innumerable candles, a swinging sun, and danger around every turn. It's gorgeous. Perhaps the greatest love within this film is for the art of movie making itself. Demon from 2015 is on the set, and it's really interesting. Piotr and Zaneta have met over the World Wide Web, and they're about to be married. He barely speaks Polish, having lived in England for several years. As he comes back to his home country for the wedding, he moves into an old home given to him by the family, and it's owned by the grandfather. However, as he works in the yard, he uncovers a skeleton and starts to have visions of a dead bride named Hannah, who slowly possesses him during his wedding reception. As Anita is from a rich family, they want to hide this from their friends, so they ply them with food and drink as a doctor and priest examine Peter. Only a teacher, who is the last surviving Jewish person in this town, recognizes that the possessed man is speaking Yiddish and has the voice of Hannah. This is directed by Marcin Morona, who wrote the story with Powell Maslona, which was based on the play Adherence. Demon is a new way of looking at the book myth, but infused through marriage. In the act of being wed, we move past our previous selves and become someone new, someone united not only with a real person, but an entirely different family. Zaneta's relatives may have profited from World War II and the extermination of the Jewish people. Now their sins have come back to infect the new person who is joining their family. As the guests drunkenly become debauched and the winds and rains howl with fury outside, the groom is in the basement losing his sanity. Sadly, the director of this film committed suicide in his hotel room during a Polish film festival where the movie is being shown. Beyond the tragic loss of life, this act ends the art which could have been created. It's a loss, and it depressed me that I found out partway through the movie. November from 2017 takes place in 19th century Estonia. It begins with a krat appearing. If you don't know what a krat is, if you play Dungeons & Dragons, you're a nerd like me. It's a warbound. It's a collection of materials given magic life. The krats in this are hay and old household implements powered by the devil and 3 drops of blood. Each villager signs up for a krat, selling away their soul. This krat steals a cow for a villager named Rock, who has tricked Satan by giving him 3 drops of dark berry juice instead of the blood that is part of his soul. There is so much going on in the village of this movie. Kind of like the plague descending as a young woman who becomes a pig, who makes a deal with Xander the Elder to allow Lena and Hans to live. But then the pig is killed while swearing on a Bible. Lena is in love with Hans, but has basically been sold in a drunken deal to a pig farmer, while Hans is obsessed with the sleepwalking Baroness. Lena, who's also a werewolf, gets a magical arrow from a witch as she wants to kill the Baroness and win over Hans, but can't bring herself to do it. The supernatural becomes a way for nearly everyone to attempt to find their doomed love and makes it true. Hans has sold his soul for a krat that regales him with stories of lovers and how dismal their fates are before melting in the snow, leaving behind a ring that he wants to use to propose to the Baroness, who turns out to be Lena in disguise. As for the Baroness, she is sleepwalked to her death. As the krat finally melts away, the devil returns to snap Hans's neck. Now 2 funeral processions make their way through the village, one for Hans and one for the Baroness. Lena drowns herself in the river, bringing gold to all the villagers, who leave her a necklace, the perfect gift for the virgin bride. Before she passes on, she kisses Hans underwater one more time and says, "Oh yes, just what a virgin bride dreams of." Director and writer Rainer Sarnay has created a black and white world where the rich mock the poor with their manor homes and gold altars, as the put upon hire a witch to do their bidding. The villagers are able to trick the devils to befoul them once or twice, like wearing their pants on their heads so that people think they have 2 asses. But the next time, the next person, they're not so lucky. No one wants to work, and the krats fulfill their labors, but they're secretly deadly or unlucky to everyone. Even though this film is filled with magical realism and set in another world, I couldn't help but see so much of real life in it. Leighton from 1982 is not the type of movie that's going to thrill your audience with jump scares or play well at a Halloween party. It is, however, a movie that has frightening moments within it and images that have stayed with me longer than the latest horror movie I've seen that has been promised to keep me awake at night and dominate my thoughts. And that never happens with most horror movies I see, and it has with Light. This is a movie that depends on what you see more than what you think the film tells you, and that you will be the judge if what you see is really happening in the minds of the character. Is magic real? Are these moments happening? Even the title takes a bit of thought, as a litany is a form of prayer usually spoken by a priest, in which a celibate makes spoken petitions to a higher being, and the followers answer with a fixed response. If you've been to the Catholic Church, there are 6 approved litanies, and they all are mostly answered with "Lord, have mercy on us." Also, your enjoyment of this film will depend on your willingness to accept things like faith, and there could be something beyond our world, even if some of the characters directly state they have no belief. This is at once a fantastique, the intrusion of supernatural phenomena into an otherwise realistic narrative, and a juxtaposition of that concept. But let's stop using big college words. Let me just talk about this movie. Nora has a premonition that shocks her out of her ordinary life and sends her in the streets of Leighton, a village that is celebrating the Festival of the Dead. If this isn't a co-opted pagan rite-turned-commercial holiday, things just feel off, way off. She sees her husband, Jock, who is director and writer Jean-Pierre Macchi. She encounters people dressed as clowns and animals, all as silver masked men who look like Fantomas by way of Cobra's Destro keep on playing music. Jock is in town to excavate something, the kind of something that unleashes lightning snakes that make their way into the water supply, causing some to fade away literally and others to become catatonic. Some people just start killing everyone. Nora begins searching for him through the cobblestone alleys and narrow hallways, and everywhere she goes, a dream is still calling to her. As for those electrical beings, Dr. Steve Julian seems to know what they are, and he isn't telling anyone. This movie feels as if the prisoner was trapped in the mountains of the religious backwoods of Don't Torture Ducking by way of Valerie and her Week of Wonders in a hospital that is very let sleeping corpses lie. Commissioner Bullock must have gone to Police Academy with Arthur Kennedy's character from that movie, but these are only touchdowns that I put in the way for myself because there's so much in this movie, and it's its own trip, and it's one that you kind of need something to guide you back, some breadcrumbs. There are many kinds of movie lovers, but for the sake of argument, let's say there are 2. In the oddest movies of a movie, like let's say Inferno, when it seems like Argento's making it all up as he's filming, or perhaps he's capturing another reality that barely he comprehends, some people grow frustrated by the utter lack of story and the constant narrative shifts, and some grow excited by it. If you're the latter, and I hope you are, you're the right person to watch Leighton. Also, if you believe in lucid dreaming, yet also understand that dreams are like rapids that we can't ford across in our boats of limited human understanding, you will find something here. Also, if you're on the right side of artist versus hack arguments regarding the works of Roland and Jess Franco, you also feel the warm blanket of droning doom here. So, questions: why does Nora see Jock covered in blood as coffins float down rivers and bodies float from the sky? What happens to Eric, and why is he hooked up to all these machines? Why Eric also says the most insane line in this: "We're dreaming your life, when the dream stops, you die." Why is the score by Frere, the same person playing the Doctor, shift from 80s Euro horror like Goblin to synth whenever these metal-faced people start playing? And they're all playing the music of composer Dmitri Shostakovich. Jock asked Nora at one point, if God exists, what difference does it make if you're alive or dead? In the middle of a festival celebrating death, two people are trying to get out of the town alive, but they're not real. They're just characters in a movie. But even so, can we learn from them? Shouldn't we try to get out alive and stop obsessing about death with looms in every frame of this as skulls appear every few seconds just at the edge of the frame? I read one breakdown of this movie that claims its wild swings emulate old movie serials where each episode ended in the sure death of its protagonist only for it to be solved next week. There's that. There are also echoes of Jodorowsky or when Fulci stops caring about the plot and gets absolute and when the drugs kick in too. And what does this all mean? Does it have to mean anything? I have to confess that this movie, again, is not spooky, yet I've been obsessed by age as of late, by life change, by legacy. I don't even know if what I do matters sometimes, but what really matters, who knows? I just know that movies make me feel things, deep and meaningful things, that this movie brought me a flood of joy, and that there's a dearth of that in our current timeline. So I want to share it with you. You really do need to see Light, and it's incredible. The next film on the set is Blood Tea and Red String. It took 13 years to make by Christian Segovatsky, and it was worth every second. It is about white mice that have commissioned a doll from the creatures who dwell under the oak. Once this doll is created, the artists fall in love with her. They place an egg inside of her body and put it into a place of worship. The mice return and steal away the doll, sending the creatures who dwell on a journey to get her back. Excited having the doll, the mice become besotted on blood tea. The egg hatches and a bird with the face of the doll emerges, flying away but soon becoming trapped in a spider's web and dying. The artist dwellers take her back and rebuild the dead body, but it's stolen again by the mice, which turns into a gigantic battle, leading to the body being torn to pieces, which leads to the creatures giving the mice the doll parts and sending the body of the bird downstream. Shot in 16mm in stop motion style that had to take forever, 13 years, and that had to feel like forever. What I've just told you will not prepare you for what you're about to experience. With no dialogue, you're free to imagine who these characters are, what they represent. I can't explain the vibe of this, as it feels like something for children while also feeling occult and forbidden. It's a must-see. Nazareno Cruz in The Wolf from 1975 is next. Nazareno Cruz is the seventh son of the now-dead Jeremias, born when his mother Damiana wanted a son to replace the sixth that she lost along with her husband in a flood. Despite people thinking he was born with the curse of being a werewolf, Nazareno grows into a happy life. Perhaps that's because his godmother witch gave him his name, which means Nazarene Cross. Everyone in the village seems to love him, and there's been no sign of him becoming a wolf. Yet. He's already found true love in Griselda, who stands out amongst the women due to her blonde hair. His mother and godmother try to keep him from falling in love, but once he does, he starts to transform. He starts to become the wolf. That's when Mandinga, the devil, comes to promise him a life of riches and that he'll never become the wolf. All he has to do is refuse being in love, forget Griselda. Nazareno can't do that, and the problems begin. This is one of the most successful movies ever made in Argentina, and their official submission for the country in the Best Foreign Language film at the 1976 Academy Awards. In 2022, it was selected as the 17th best movie in the history of the country. It's a ravishing film, one that uses the beauty of nature to its fullest. Where else will you see a dog play a werewolf, or a wolf we discover the Satan's just misunderstood? Aquelarre is from 1984, and Garazi is the granddaughter of a woman burned as a witch who finds herself battling the Catholic Church just like her ancestor. The name of this film means Witch's Sabbath in English, and this goes into the witch trials against the women of San Cruz de Araiz, which is part of Navarre in northern Spain. That trial found 27 people arrested, with 11 women and 2 men accused of witchcraft. They are executed in the name of Catholicism, with the rest later dying from their mistreatment. The Inquisition came from a church that was more about men and their desires and serving the Lord, and again, that doesn't sound like history repeating at all, does it? Director Pedro Lea said of the actor who played Acevedo, the lead Inquisitor, "What better Inquisitor than Lopez Vasquez? He accepted the role and turned it into another character that was amazing. A religious sadist, cruel and libidious. Simply his way of brushing Sylvia Moon's chest with his fingers while removing a medal, of directing another torture session with her naked, and then flagellating himself in a cell demonstrates a perfect interpretive treatment of the repression suffered by the sinister friar." This film was filmed on location in the caves of Zugarramurdi, which are known as the Cathedral of the Devil. This same area figures into the plot of Witching and Bitching. From the Old Earth from 1981 was directed by Will Aaron and written by Gwen Thomas, and it played in primary schools thanks to the Welsh Film Board who produced it. While it seems odd and a bit scary to us as adults, imagine watching this if you were under 10 years old in a captive grade school audience. There's a extra on the set where Aaron discussed how the film was made and how he learned years later through Facebook how many Welsh children were absolutely destroyed by this movie. I cannot pronounce any of the Welsh things in this movie, but it's about a man named William Jones who is toiling in his garden when he discovers a stone head. It's so frightening to his wife that it causes her nightmares, and she forces him to give it to a female archaeologist, an expert on the Celts. She brings it back to her home where it starts to infect her family with fear. including a monstrous animal that keeps showing up and always their car wreck. It seems beyond the budget of the feature, but it does it. This is, again, a very low budget movie. It's only about an hour, but it really works. It has led to childhood trauma, such as this quote I found from Mary Williams, who watched it when she was a student. She said, whose opinion was that this was a film for children. It has created hours of lost sleep, years, and trauma, and close to an accident a few times. You turn around to see if a man with horns is in the back of your car while driving. Not to be advised. It's films like this are the reason why I think this box set exists. It's just such a singular and strange film. One has created a stir in a country you may never get to, and soon you learn so much that you never expected to know. Speaking of things that we didn't know, let's get to the final part of our interview with Kayla Janice. My last question for you is, I know since your documentary came out, there's kind of been a modern wave of, like, I think Hollywood has understood. They started to use the term folk horror to describe some of those films. Do you see any of those as having quality, or are there some that just like, I got nothing.
I don't know which movies are you talking about?
It just seems like so many movies use the phrase folk horror now when they're sold versus that phrase wasn't used before. Are there any that you think, sure.
There's all kinds of new folk horror films that have come out since my movie that, I would say are great folk horror films. It's just that, yes, these labels are just things that, you just can't get too attached to them. They're made by sales agents most of the time, so it's like a lot. I remember everybody getting upset about elevated horror, and it was like, who cares? Like, it's just I was literally in the room when that word was used for the first time. And it was like at a pitch at the Cannes Film Festival. And I remember everyone in this audience groaned because somebody said, well, my movie is more like elevated horror. And everybody in the room was like genre film fans and genre press. And they were all just like, ugh, but at the same time, these are just words people use to try to sell things. And it's like, when you look at genre in general, all these categorizations are used because somebody needs to convince somebody else of something. And it's like a shorthand that they use. You are trying to tell somebody that they're going to like this movie because it's this category, and then they can connect it to other things they like. And so it can be useful, to whatever word you use that gets somebody to go like, oh, okay, I get it. I like those kind of movies. That's a good thing, So it's like, who cares? It doesn't matter. It's not bad. It's never bothered me, whatever stupid terms people come up with. But with folk horror, it's like, yes, there's all kinds of people who are going to be like, oh, my movie could count as a folk horror. I'll start selling it as a folk horror because folk horror is hot right now or whatever. And I think, like, if anything, the people interviewed in my movie showed how broadly that term can be used. So it's like, sure, you can market your movie as a folk horror. It can be a folk horror as well as being 5 other things. Mm-hmm. It's not inaccurate, like it can be a drama or a comedy or a romance and also be a folk horror, that's one of the great things about horror. And all people who don't like horror, they always think horror is stupid or it's superficial or it's one-dimensional. And it's like, no, because horror films ultimately are some other genre of film with horror in it. But it's always a drama with horror or a comedy with horror, Western with horror. Like, it's never just horror. Like, there's always a human drama, usually at the center of it, that's the same as in some Imelda Staunton movie or whatever. It's just that there's more violence or threat or dread or, darkness or something like that in it that exaggerates whatever the stressors are that people are dealing with in normal movies, but those stressors are actually the same, whether it's like, your daughter died or your husband died or, or you don't have money to pay the rent or whatever, whatever the problems are in like a Ken Loach movie, the same problems are in a horror movie. It's just that everything's exaggerated to be monstrous,
As you grow up, the horror of it changes. Like, as a kid, the ghosts in Amityville Horror were frightening to me. As an adult, it's like, how are they going to pay for their next house? Because they're all in on this one. And, the renovations cost so much. That's where my mind goes versus to the ghosts now.
That's funny. With Amityville Horror, I was like, as a kid, I was obsessed with the drawings in the book. Like the book, the Amityville Horror, it had the pages of like Jody the pig. And then there was like all these maps of the property. And I would just look at those images over and over and over and over again. I was like obsessed with like just the floor plan of the house was terrifying to me somehow, and I have like, as an adult, I love maps. I love floor plan. Like, I love the aesthetic of a floor plan. And it probably comes from the Amityville book. I don't even know where I was going with that, but I think
No,
it's
but
just in Amityville.
it's interesting to me because what becomes frightening to me is like the book House of Leaves, where the house starts to change itself and hallways always take 5 minutes to walk down, even if they're short. And it's like, because your physical sense of space becomes manipulated by a haunted house. And that's more frightening than a scary face or a ghost, that like reality is starting to shift when you're in these places.
I love the scene in House of Leaves, actually, when they call the police because there's an extra door in the closet. And the police are like, what are you calling us for? It's like, this door was not here. And they're like, so are you saying somebody broke into your house and built a door? Like, what are we supposed to do here? So, yeah, all the extras, I would say, like, all the bonus features on this disc, I think overall are like even stronger than the last disc. So yeah, I remember when Allison's Birthday came out on Blu-ray, like, I think Blu-ray.com somehow ended up reviewing the discs individually as though they were like standalone releases. And so they reviewed Allison's Birthday and they were like, well, it really didn't have that many extras or whatever. And it was like, well, it didn't have many extras because it was on a disc with another movie. And that film also had 2 extras. So we actually had like kind of packed out the disc as much as we could. But they reviewed it as though it was like a standalone movie that we only put a couple extras on. And I think that actually made me try even harder this time to make the extras like even stronger for each movie.
I'd like to thank Severin and their PR team and Kayla for being part of the show this week. Doing this interview with us, it really helped a lot, really helped me understand a lot more of the set. Let's get to the final movies on the set. The City of the Dead. We may all know this as Horror Hotel. It's John Llewellyn Moxley's first movie, made in the UK but set in the US. Everyone's doing their best American accent. In 1692 in Whitewood, Massachusetts, Evelyn Selwyn and Jethro Keane sold their souls to the devil for eternal life and revenge on everyone. They just sacrificed one virgin during Candlemas Eve and another during the witch's Sabbath. That said, Elizabeth is soon tried for being a witch and burned alive. History professor Alan Driscoll, Christopher Lee, tells Nan Barlow that if she wants to learn about Whitewood, she should go there. So she visits the town, staying at the Ravens Inn, which is owned by Mrs. Newless, and soon meets the only normal person in town, or so she thinks, Patricia Russell, who gives her a book on witchcraft. She learns this Candlemas Eve just in time to be sacrificed on an altar. Her fiancé, Bill Maitland, brings his brother Richard to town along with Patricia, who wonders where her friend has gone. You can imagine what happens next, but it's still fun. This is written by George Pax. This is a pilot for a television series that would have starred Boris Karloff. It's produced by Milton Subotsky, who rewrote it to be longer, including a romantic subplot about the boyfriend who goes looking for Nan. It's produced by Vulcan Productions, and it was made by Sapowski and Max Rosenberg. If those names sound familiar, they're Amicus, so you can consider this the first Amicus movie. The big difference between City of the Living Dead and the American Horror Hotel cut. So what's the difference between City of the Living Dead and the American Horror Hotel cut? Well, some different dialogue, and I brought in my friends Bob from House by the Cemetery and Carolyn De Fonseca to act out the parts. Elizabeth Selwyn, before being burned at the stake, says the following as she's burned alive.
I have made my pact with thee, O Lucifer. Hear me. Hear me. I will do thy bidding for all eternity. For all eternity shall I practice the ritual of Black Mass. For all eternity shall I sacrifice unto thee. I give thee my soul. Take me into thy service.
Jethro Keane then adds,
O Lucifer, listen to thy servant. Grant her this pact for all eternity, and I with her. And if we fail thee but once, you may do with our souls what you will.
Make this city an example of thy vengeance. Curse it for all eternity. Let me be the instrument of thy curse. Hear me, O Lucifer, hear me.
In 2011, Evil Calls the Raven came out with a very similar plot and even lifted footage directly from this movie. But who can complain, because Iron Maiden's Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter and King Diamond's Sleepless Nights videos did as well. This movie played on UHF enough that the Misfits even wrote a song about it. Final film in the set is The Rites of May from 1976. Known in its native Philippines as Idom, or Black, The Rites of May is the first movie by Mike DeLeon. It begins during a seance as the medium tells Teresa that her sister Rosa, a Catholic nun, is dead. Teresa asks if she may speak to her, but the medium says to wait until Good Friday. Meanwhile, June has come back to visit his infirm and mute father, Dr. Torres. While there, he's shooting photos for a magazine, taking photos of the celebrations of Lent in Manila, an extremely religious city. As he takes these pictures, he meets Teresa, which we find out is supernaturally predestined to happen. She keeps going in and out of fugue states. Anyway, he takes a photo that moves the plot forward. I don't want to give away too much about this because that's the whole story is such a mystery and it's so cool. The director told the Cannes Film Festival, I got interested in doing a film that used a camera to tell a story with one character. No dialogue and just sound effects. And one thing I liked about Blow Up was the idea of existential alienation. Long ago was a ghost story. The character takes photos and he does not realize that he has photographed a ghost or a presence in his own house. I mean, his camera saw it, but he didn't, and that blew my mind. This movie did not do well in cinemas, but it won Best Picture, and Shara Santos was Best Actress at the 1978 Asian Film Festival. Since then, it's been recognized as a classic. Its heart feels authentic as spiritualist Becky Gutierrez wrote the seance scenes, which she based on real rituals. It also uses the ghosts in its story to symbolize the past of the Philippines, a country that can't seem to move past its history filled with violence that will somehow always be haunted by it. De Leon said he started this as a simple ghost story, but grew into an epic with deep themes. This was shot in his grandparents' house in San Vicente, San Miguel. I have a big affinity for movies that get into the supernatural and the religious that were filmed in family homes. Like another one I can think of is Martin. Can you think of any others? Let me know. Again, thanks to Severin for putting out such an amazing set and Kayla for all her hard work on it. This is definitely a must-buy, I think. If you'd like to talk to me about the set, you can reach out at bnsboutmovies@gmail.com. Also on the site, you can read the interview with Kayla in print form, and you can also see all of the reviews as well as the reviews of the short films that are on the set. Visit us at bnsboutmovies.com. You can also make a Ko-fi donation if you'd like, and I'll do any movie you'd like and do it on the show. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.